Hello again.
Hello, and a completely different day as our previous Christmas episode. Now it's...
Should we buy more clothes?
Yeah, or more studio backgrounds, or no, what we do, how are we gonna reveal? Okay, Santa doesn't exist, and we sometimes shoot consecutive videos in the same place.
Okay.
And I spoiled the world to kids and adults.
No. Okay, what is the topic of today's second episode?
So I think in episode 3, before the Christmas one, we promised that we would talk about what do you do once you have conducted the interview. So we talked about sampling, the purposeful sampling, how you dig for the gold in the interviews, how you make the notes and all of that. And then we left a bit of a cliffhanger that what do you do when you have those? When, let's say you have 30 different interview transcripts on your table, and what do you do as an academic, and then maybe as in the business thing, what's the thing you do? But what do you do? We have 30 interviews waiting for your holiday break to start analysis on them. So what does Professor Schild do?
Yeah, so I take an academic approach, right? So it's not directly applicable in every way to everything else, but the first thing you need to do, and this is very typical, is you need to take overall control of your data. And that has tended to mean writing short case narratives about individual units, organizations, or individuals, and just like summarizing what's happening in different interviews. So you have this overview of this is what I have, these are the interesting things.
And would you normally you would write it somewhere, or you would talk with it, your researchers, or what's the output of that?
Well, that depends on whether you're collaborating with other people, if you're doing the study yourself, how well you... If you did all the interviews yourself, it's easier, right? Because then you know that. But typically, I would have 1-2 paragraph summary about every informant, what their views were, and what were the kind of highlights of that interview.
Yeah, very similar to what I'm doing consulting as well. That you would email your teammates what were the kind of the key points in a way, what's surprising, what did we not know before, and then a bit of a longer summary of what is everything that you learned. Yeah, not the raw notes, but a bit of the distilled, one pager type of summary. Yeah.
And it's really great to do this analysis already while you're doing interviews.
Yes.
Because then it also surfaces what are the follow-up questions we should ask other people, and
absolutely
emerging hypotheses. Yeah, so that's the first step. And at the same time, and a bit following that, in academic research, you want to kind of find the focus. In academia, we have this thing that always reviewers say, what is this a case of? What is the best story you can tell with your interview data? And of course, in business, you kind of have the goal, which is very clear, why are you doing the interviews? But in academia, when you write the study, even if you know exactly what the phenomenon is, you still want to find a sharp angle how to attack it. Is this a case of if it's an organizational change, it could be a case of resistance, or it could be a case of political coalitions.
And is this why you sometimes see the same author publish about the same company, 10 different papers year after year? So they always take the same stack and they go what's the focus of the year? It's emotion.
It's become less common. It's not. It's less common to have multiple studies from the same data set, actually. It used to be more like that, but...
I bet the downfall of Nokia has been published 200 papers.
No, but they are all different data sets, I think.
Okay, that's why they fell, because they were all talking with different researchers.
Yeah, my colleague Juhan Lambert from University of Jyväskylä actually did this meta-study which looked at the different explanations for downfall of Nokia, and I think he found 200.
Okay.
And he said it's a bit like the fall of Rome in history, that if you read history, you will find many different reasons why the Rome fell.
And depending on the focus of all the researchers.
Yes, and this is why especially in academic research, you want to have a sharp focus for your study, and you really want to like read your data from that perspective. Because if you're a historian and you're telling a story about the fall of Rome, you need one focus, right? You can focus on 12 different factors, and then you see, what does my data tell?
Yeah, what is foreground and what is background?
Yeah, exactly. So that's the second step. And then the third step, which is really harnessing the evidence from the data around your research focus. So if it's all about the narcissism of the CEO, then you want to do like, what data do I have about that? What are the people's perceptions? What are the outcomes? What are the dynamics that reinforce or alleviate those dynamics?
So it's a bit like being like a click journalist, that you find your angle and then you try to turn the story to be that.
Yeah, no, but instead of like, I guess in journalism you want to go for that one killer quote that you can blast on the cover.
Yeah.
But in qualitative research at this step you really aim for comprehensiveness. So you get like all the evidence, whether it's like not the best evidence, but everything you want. So that when you start, then you move to the step 4, you have like all the nuggets of gold and silver and maybe iron, bronze, all the metals.
So you coded them somehow and this is where you would start the kind of code books and all of that.
Yes. Yeah. So I think already when you're looking at the focus, you're doing some coding. You're doing some first order coding in your interviews just to make them accessible later on. That here there was this kind of material, here that kind of material. But typically when you have really kind of found what's the story, then you would start developing this kind of code book exactly. Not top down, but bottom up with the focus. And often before you start that coding, you also go back to literature and say, okay, what exactly have people said about my topic?
Yeah.
Like especially in recent years.
And is there then this whole thing that you have to like decide if you try to put it into existing kind of framework, or if you're trying to make new theory or?
Yeah, I think it's something in between. So in my field, at least, when you do this kind of theory building research, it doesn't go well with the reviewers if you just use existing concepts, because it feels like you're not actually generating new knowledge from your case, but you're kind of force-feeding your case to the existing literature, which is kind of an easier task. It's not very difficult, right, to look at your data and see, okay, this is an instance of that theoretical concept. But at the same time, you want them to relate to that. So like instead of, let's say it's like identity claims, instead of like I'm a lawyer, I do this. Instead of saying it's an identity claim, you would think like, okay, I'm coding everything related to identity, but I try to really get like how they approach it, like when I'm using AI, I don't feel I'm, leveraging my expertise or something. So it would be...
So somehow like you try to anchor it to existing knowledge, but then do some kind of a little beyond something, or applying it in a context which it hasn't been applied before, or something interesting but familiar.
Something interesting, and that comes genuinely from the informants, from the data you have. And that's probably different from consulting, where your goal is not to generate new abstract knowledge. Your goal is to generate knowledge from the case that connects nicely to the...
But you are still always looking for the kind of the so what in a way like this.
Of course.
Like what is, in a way, what is not obvious from it. Like there's a lot of stuff which is obvious, but like what are those insights where there's really something new and something kind of newsworthy almost, which is kind of like it's almost familiar, this is a whatever M&A case, but this is really the crux of the issue. Like you try to find that Maybe it's similar. That's kind of it's pretty much familiar, but there's something like unique in this.
It must be tough because you need to find something that is also newsworthy to the managers in that organization who have been there for a long time, right?
Yeah, exactly, and it's and that's the only audience or the primary. There's no there's no peer reviews to say that hey, great analysis. We really found a new theory from this. Maybe we'll send a summary to the informants. That's not the case. That's of course always practical, but and there's often there are kind of surprises even if you just interview like the top team, for example. I did a lot of that. I would interview all the members of a management team to talk about the dynamics of that management team, what is working, what is not working. I used to have this sheet that I would do 15 different questions, I can trust each other on the management team. Then I would ask them, okay, just grade it 1 to 5, and then they give 2, and I was like, okay, it's a 2. Why is it a 2? And that way to kind of get both quantitative and qualitative data, and then really dig deep into what is happening, and then a summary of those results where you get both the numbers, the average trust is 3.5, and then you get all of the anonymous quotes per theme. That's a really good discussion starter for the management team. Because of course they, in a way, they know it, they've all lived in that, but now you suddenly get the thoughts from every head, put on a paper, it's a number, it's 3 out of 5, so it's a real issue. That then spurs really good discussion. And then you just have to identify again what is foreground, what is background, what is signal, what is noise, like our blog name. But you are picking in a way your focus area, and you have to pick those nuggets that don't talk about it's kind of 4 out of 5, we're kind of happy. Find those areas where they really should be discussing, where it's not going well, or it's really a strength of the company.
And and of course if you have a great idea of what's the phenomenon you're capturing, you know already what the focus is, what's really interesting in the case, then you can start doing your interviews with that in mind, and it becomes much easier then to analyze the interviews because the question's structured already in this way.
Let's now go back to this academic paper. So we did some coding of the first level, we found the focus,
we captured comprehensively.
How do you think get the paper out?
Yeah, the fourth step.
Profit.
Yes, the fourth step is that you have to develop a theoretical model these days. At least in the type of qualitative research I do, theory building research, that tends to be actually now associated with the graphical figure of boxes and arrows. That's a bit like a bit of a cliche, this box and arrow focus, and historians would hate that, and some other.
Oh, they would study it. They would go
there are different strands of qualitative research that I have to acknowledge, and not everybody is into boxes and arrows. But I think at least for me it gives some kind of discipline that I have coded all the data, and now the story is okay, I want to create a theoretical explanation that begins from somewhere and ends somewhere. So there's certain conditions in this organization or in this industry, and something interesting starts to happen. How does it unfold? Maybe there's variance, maybe some companies are successful, some are unsuccessful, and it's just kind of I tend to think it as a causal model, but of course causality is always
so your boxes would be different concepts, and then you have collected all the proof related to that concept, and then your arrows are causal or chronological or somehow
Mostly, one of the things that many people trip initially when they start doing qualitative research is that they create figures where arrows mean different things. So some of them are chronological, some are causal, some are this is associated with that type of thing.
Or subcategories.
And so it's generally the good idea is to have only one type of arrows. Or if you have multiple, you make them graphically very distinct and you explain that too. But I think of causality is a difficult concept. I'm not going to go there, but I tend to think them personally as causal relations. That if this hadn't happened, this wouldn't have happened, right? Or if you have more narcissistic CEO, these processes are more likely to happen. And then when these processes happen, what's the outcome? So yeah, and developing that model is also like really useful in finding your focus. Because you want to communicate like what's really interesting in a way that has all the necessary things but nothing more, right? You really don't want to have this, oh, then we observed also that, this is happening in the organization.
And how do you decide what is signal and what is noise?
It connects, I guess, to the empirics and the theory. Like you want to be honest to the empirics, right? That you really need to believe that this model that I'm presenting is capturing what happened really, based on my own interpretation from what various people said. So like you have multiple informants who either made the same interpretation themselves sometimes, or where you can infer the same kind of dynamic. And then of course it needs to also connect in an interesting way to the existing literature. So it kind of adds to what we already know. It connects to the central concepts that people would expect when you talk about this phenomenon.
And which one do you buy as kind of what you learned, or how it should be?
I'm biased towards the empirics in a way, but I guess the same story can be packaged in different theoretical concepts. And sometimes there's a choice like, is something a box or is it an arrow? I mean, especially if you look at linkages between processes. Like, is this a process or is this a link between two processes? I mean, it's not... So you try to make those choices based on the literature.
Yeah. What I find interesting is like when there's a new field, like let's say now like AI and agentic AI, I think somehow this interplay between kind of what is being written and published, like there's a lot of articles around it, and kind of, because no one has really done a full agentic transformation in 2025, right? But still there's kind of a lot of people writing about how it is, and then you have kind of people talking about it in the concepts they're learning kind of by reading from others, and somehow you get this like an echo chamber type of thing that you are explaining stuff based on how you think it's explainable, even though the reality basis might still be very low. And then I think at some point you will start to kind of engage more with the companies who've actually deployed like an actual agent somewhere, and they're learning maybe very different things than this whole echo chamber of like half of the jobs will be replaced by agents by next Christmas, versus like it's actually quite painful to do a little agent. I think somehow this interplay of like the empirics and kind of what you actually learn, and then how people are expecting it to behave and talking about it, and so that's a paper you could do on that.
I have to say, I mean, this gets very close to me because there's all this work about AI automation and AI augmentation. And initially it was just like you either automate knowledge work with AI or you augment it with AI tools. But then actually the more you start studying it, the dichotomy breaks down completely, right? Like I'm using some cursor to code like what there is automation, what is augmentation, and what if it runs for like 1 minute or 5 minutes or 10 minutes, how is that different?
Which also explains, I think, the disconnect between, I think, a lot of consultants, a lot of market research, a lot of maybe kind of executives who talk about this, that, it will automate all of our knowledge work very soon. And then when you actually are using it yourself, you're seeing that, no, it's more like augmenting your work. But I don't know, Skim, I don't think we could really say that we are. It's very hard to say, like, did we now automate someone away, or did we not? It's somehow just giving superpowers to
I think that's
somehow,
it, right? And
of course, the service itself would be impossible without AI, so it's kind of empowering the product as well. But I think it's going to be an interesting space next year when, like, I think the hype and the reality kind of meet somewhere.
Yeah.
And of course, where that meeting point is like, I don't know, $10 trillion stock market valuation question. Do you believe in the it will solve everything, or do you kind of say, we kind of saw the top of it? And
I find it personally, I'm not so interested in the dollars, but I find it like for business schools, this is a massive opportunity and challenge, because I don't think companies have taken really good grip of this, like what's happening to knowledge work at the moment, and engineering schools won't fix that. So I think it's going to be business schools who have to create these concepts, do some high quality qualitative research using Skimble, and then start creating these answers of like how to do things. And
no, I think that's interesting. Maybe let's
Next episode should be about how to use Skimble in qualitative research, right?
Okay. Or we frame it as something less commercial. In reality, it's about that, but we talk about automation and the future of augmented knowledge work. But it's just a sales episode anyway.
We wouldn't do that, would we?
Let's not tell anyone listening to this.
All right, hey, that was our last episode of the year, I think.
I think so.
So see you next year.